On CNB today, we also have these two cars, and that's the one clash we've been waiting for some time now. Right since Honda first showed the Mobilio at the Auto Expo, Maruti's been sort of waiting and watching, and which is why you also have a limited edition Ertiga that's driven into the market just this week. But how do the two cars compete, especially when you look at it from the point of view of individual buyers? Let's get straight into it. The rise of the MPVs. Yes, it's time to stop calling them multi-utility vehicles and instead dub them, as the world does, multi-purpose vehicles or MPVs. The Toyota Innova is the king of this hill, but yes, it, along with others like the Tata Sumo Grande and the Ariya and the Mahindra Xylo, are all in that MUV space, really. People movers with more of a fleet application than a personal or individual one. The Nissan Evalia at the top end and the Chevrolet Enjoy at the bottom have tried to be more, but really the Innova remains the undisputed leader. So that is why Maruti's decision to drive in the Ertiga in 2012 was seen as a misguided move by some. But $1.5 lakh Ertigas later, the idea of stretching the Swift platform and throwing in 3 rows of seats into a zippy car-like monocoque frame is now seen as a stroke of genius. And that is why the Mobilio is also a very good idea. I genuinely believe that the Indian market will benefit from the influx of more MPVs. And yes, that's despite the fact that we are hankering after the compact SUV. The reason? An MPV is more versatile and utilitarian than a hatch or a sedan, and it gives you multiple space options while staying compact and easy to drive. Now, it was at the beginning of July that we got you all the details on the Honda Mobilio. It was Bala who drove the car and reviewed it, and Bala is with me right now as well. Bala, very positive sort of a impression is what you carried back with you from Nashik.
Yes, Siddharth, that's right, because we kind of spend time with the diesel engine because that's going to be the main real volume driver for Honda, and we got the impression that it's a fairly good fuel efficient and a less noisy engine.
Now, of course, at the time, I remember you mentioned that it's almost a relief that it's less noisy, because remember the Amaze, same engine, clatters like anything. But before anything else, I want to also ask you your impressions. You got the two cars standing next to each other. You always had the Ertiga in your mind, I know, when you were driving it in Nashik, but now that they are next to each other, first thing, in terms of looks, which one works for you?
The Ertiga continues to be boring for me because with the Mobilio, Honda has really tried to give this MPV a little more appeal, because at least from the side and the rear there's a little bit more lines and a little more, I don't know, a little bit more bolder stance that the car gets. I mean, it's a little low as you can see, but from the sides and the rear is where the real touch comes in. Yes, from the front it looks like the Brio or possibly even the Amaze, but from the sides and the rear it's a different ball game compared to the Ertiga.
I'm going to disagree with Bala completely, and that's possibly a surprise to not just him, but a lot of you as well. For me, actually, it is the clean lines on the Ertiga that work, because it's not trying too hard to be anything else. It's got straight lines along the side, it's got that ample height, it tells you straight away it's an MPV. On this car, as Bala was saying, there's lots of different kinds of work done in the metal. You've got what they call this lightning bolt along the side. The shoulder line dips down here, gives you a nice ample sort of glass coverage. But you know, Bala, even though I know that's been done intentionally to give you an airy sense of space on the inside, from the outside the proportions just look completely wrong. It just looks almost like a hearse, for lack of a better comparison.
I think they tried too much with the...
I think it's been overstyled. I think if they had just kept it a little bit simple. I liked some of the elements and the ideas behind them, but yes, it just looks like there's 2 or 3 ideas and they've all been sort of meshed together.
Because so that goes all the way to the rear tail.
Some of it is stylish, yes, but you know, they just tried too hard. And for the buyer though, that might be the big distinction, because it isn't boring, it isn't typically MPV like. I mean, all the other cars, whether it's the Xylo, the Enjoy, or of course the Ertiga and the Innova, they all have a very similar straight sort of a feel. There's lots more going on this car for sure. So maybe I am overreacting to the over-styling, but for many consumers, the flashier looks will likely seem way more attractive than the comparatively drab Ertiga. On the inside, the cabins are similar alright, though the Mobilio is longer and has a more ample wheelbase, resulting in a roomier cabin. The Ertiga is well proportioned but lacks legroom in the second row. The color palette used is similar in both. The Ertiga looks functional, but the plastics seem a little bit tacky and cheap. On the Mobilio, it's a better feel and the materials appear superior. The black and beige two-tone treatment is smart, but it's only in the upper variants. The optional 4 wood, well, all I will say is I hope buyers opt not to get it. It's very plasticky and forced looking. Both cars have steering mounted controls and Bluetooth telephony only in the top end variants. Today we are driving the petrols, but very quickly let's also talk of the diesels, as they are the sales drivers in our market, as we know. Now on paper, the Mobilio has the more powerful motor and the ID Tech has proved to be right for India. But it does the job really well in the Mobilio. Honda claims excellent mileage of 24.2 kilometers per litre. Being tuned with an efficiency bias means a lack on punchy power when you have a full load. On the Ertiga, it is of course the good old DDIS motor. The 1.3 litre unit is surprisingly sprightly and it's well tuned. And it's mated really well to the 5-speed manual gearbox. Claimed mileage is lower than the Mobilios, but it's still impressive at 20.77 kilometers per litre. Of course, we have Fiat to thank for that gem of an engine, don't we? And now on to the petrols. Now the reason we have the petrols on the show is that they often get ignored by our lot, and yet a lot of individual buyers with limited driving distances are once again opting for the lower priced petrol variants, aren't they?
The iVTEC is really smooth in its power delivery. That's not surprising. You expect that from a Honda petrol engine. But the part that is surprising is that it almost feels a little punchier than it feels on the city. Now don't forget, this is an empty car. I don't have 7 people in here, including myself. So maybe it'll feel a little bit different with full load. So I will make that little bit of a disclaimer there for that. But it is nice and smooth. It's fairly exciting on performance, though of course it's not a fire starter. The part that is surprising to me is how, once again, cabin insulation in terms of noise isn't great. It's alright, but it isn't great. Seating wise, you feel that you're driving a car. It's not just the seating position, but even the way the car feels, the steering position, all of that doesn't feel like a van or an MPV. And that to a lot of people will be a very good thing.
And that's where the fact that this car is 82 millimeters shorter in height than the Ertiga shows up. Handling is good too, though the stretched bit of the car beyond the C-pillar is more apparent on tight corners. Claimed mileage on the iVTEC petrol is 17.3 kilometers per litre.
The gear shift on the Mobilio is a lot smoother. This feels a little bit notchy, but otherwise the 1.4 engine, it's a nice little revelation. It's a surprise. It's pretty smooth, feels fairly refined as well, and it's good on acceleration. So it's not that there's a massive difference between the iVTEC and this engine. But on the Ertiga, you also get a sense of being in a van. The car feels a little heavier somehow than the Mobilio does, and not as car-like, not as sedan-like. The Mobilio, driving stance, overall drivability too, is more like a sedan. On this car, you get the sense of an MPV, and you know what? Having that kind of a distinct character might actually be a good thing in a sense, because it gives the car its own identity.
The Ertiga also has a good suspension, so despite the taller ride, you get a sense of comfort from the car all through the ride. Claimed mileage on the Ertiga VVT is 16.02 kilometers per litre, so things are still looking fairly tight. The newbie not racing ahead just yet, is it?
3-row seating, always the big USP in these cars, Bala. Getting into this one is supposed to be really easy, right?
Because Honda's been harping about how easy it is, that whole one motion.
You know how it works. Yeah,
it's quite easy actually.
Oh, that is easy.
You get in.
Now, interestingly, it's a nice, easy ingress as well. It's not just about the width of the space that you get. It's also about the height. It's really easy, despite the fact that the ground clearance on this car is a little bit more than on the Ertiga. Alright, of course it's a little bit cramped back here, but a little bit better than what I expected.
Yep, because you've got a little bit of cubby holes, you've got some storage space. That's what Honda does, right? I mean, try and maximize the space, and also fairly decent kind of space on the window as well,
Yeah,
so
you
it
don't
doesn't
feel
cramped.
cramped up.
Yeah.
Man maximum, machine minimum. I thought you were going to say that, but anyway, of course under thigh support isn't great, but then you know what, in third row of most cars, it could be even a premium SUV, these seats aren't really meant for perhaps big adults in the back.
Or long drives.
Or long drives, yeah. I think 10-15 minutes back here I would be alright. After that I want to start screaming. Now let's check out the third row on the Ertiga. This one
the sliding one, right?
Yeah, this one I remember. It's not as fancy as the other one. Doesn't give you as much space either.
Yep.
But it's fairly easy to climb into, I guess. Now that's a surprising amount of space. I mean, I remember the first time we drove the Ertiga also being very surprised by how this much space has been carved out.
Yep.
This is where the height comes into play because under thigh support is a little bit better.
Yeah.
This could be a little more comfortable even though the sense of space isn't that much.
True. In terms of the position as well, you feel like you're almost on position with the driver and not like sitting in a low position like you saw on the Mobilio. So,
Like in
space-wise,
most other cars which have 3 rows.
yeah, but in terms of space, it could be a little more, the cubby holes are not like great. And in terms of overall position also, the seats are fairly comfortable and the shoulder area also is fairly good. So, the third row is quite a nice place to be in the Ertiga.
Yeah, it's not as accessible, but it's surprisingly spacious. Boot space next. Let's open this one up.
You can kind of fit in a really big suitcase here without any problems.
This is a surprising amount of space. I mean, I have to say. But how about folding up the seats and let's look at the full cargo space?
It's kind of like a 2-motion. You got to fold that one as well. And
on the Ertiga, not too much space. You could possibly put like a little overnight bag at best.
Nothing more.
But the seats do fold out really quickly. It's just that, and that's just so much more convenient perhaps. Fair amount of space, maybe not as deep as you saw in the other car.
Also, one thing is that the height is a huge difference because on the Mobilio it's a little lower, so carrying heavy stuff,
Access.
easier to just load them in. Then it's slightly higher on the Ertiga, so
Yeah,
it might be a little more difficult. But yes, that's more convenient to fold than this 2-motion.
But there is an advantage to the Mobilio's split third row seat. It means you get more flexible cargo storage options by folding just one seat down and not the whole thing. If you need to still seat 6 people, let's say. Both these cars have more appeal in the urban markets, but Honda has stated clearly it will not sell the Mobilio to fleet or taxi buyers. The Ertiga remains largely a personal driven car too, even though there are a few used as cabs. Prices now. First, the petrol variants, and it's quite apparent that the Mobilio is positioned at a premium over the Ertiga, but overall the prices are still staying below the Innovas. The diesel Mobilio will get the jazzed up RS trim, but that only arrives in September, and it's strictly for the show-offs who want edgier styling and the touchscreen entertainment and navigation option. Maruti Suzuki has launched a limited edition of the Ertiga with a chrome grille, decals and spoilers in a nice shade of blue, priced between 6,76,000 rupees and 8,05,000 rupees ex-showroom Delhi. And remember, the Ertiga is also available in a CNG option in the LXI and VXI trims. So, in this battle of the urban MPVs then, who is the winner? Well, the Mobilio is for those who want to make a style statement, want to drive a Honda, and want driving comfort ahead of all else. But given its multiple variants, better value, decent drivability and reasonable efficiency, the Ertiga is about 1 row ahead of the new Mobilio.